What is up, Nuggets? It's your boy, Killer Pizza here, with a brand new video for all you rascals and rapscallions out there. Now today I have something very special, something I was waiting on for a very long time. So I would say back in September or so when I was hunting for new Blu-rays and whatnot, I found that they had a new release for 1988's remake of The Blob by Chuck Russell, I believe, directed it. Now, I had to wait all the way until October 29th to pick this one up, so it's only a couple weeks old right now. This is the newest release from Scream Factory. I believe the first time ever this was released on Blu-ray, so just to get a little look at it, I mean, what a badass cover. I mean, this is one of the cool things that Scream Factory does. You know, you can't go wrong with them, and yeah. They did a really good job. To get right into the movie, if you guys don't remember this one, this is a film I remember a lot from a kid, but I feel like I only seen it maybe a couple times, so my memory was very thin with what really happens in this movie. To get right into it, it starts with like a little football game in a small town where this kid, Paul, is talking to his friend, trying to get up the nerve to ask out this cheerleader, Meg. So then it's a funny moment. He actually gets tackled like right through like the water table or whatnot, falls right at her feet, and then that's when he asks her, hey, what are you doing tonight? So the date is on between them, and then we spend the rest of our time, the next 20 minutes, kind of establishing characters, which this movie does a really good job making all the characters feel like they're going to matter further in the movie and giving a pretty good atmosphere in this like small town kind of vibe. So to meet the characters, we meet Paul's in the store with one of his football friends, which has a pretty funny moment, too, where his friend has to ask him for money to buy condoms, because he's like, I'm going to try to take advantage of this girl, and Paul doesn't really like it, but the kid goes up there to buy him, and the guy at the counter is giving him shit, and then his like family priest comes in and is talking about how he's doing, and then the guy at the counter comes back like, ribbed or regular condoms, in front of the priest, so he has to play it off like it's his friend, Paul. And then when they all look at Paul, he's like, come on, I can't keep this girl waiting. So it's all out of context, but makes him look terrible. So then we go to Meg's house, and when Paul comes in to meet her father, it turns out he was the guy that was selling them the condoms. So that doesn't start off pretty good for their relationship. And then we get introduced to Meg's little brother and his friend, who are trying to go to this scary movie later that his mom doesn't want him to go to. We meet this woman who runs the diner, and then the sheriff of the town who's asking her out for a date later. And then this kid, Brian, who's kind of like the outlaw kid in town. He's out with a leather jacket, riding his motorcycle and all that kind of stuff. So we get to the date where Paul takes Meg out, and in the meantime, Brian is in the woods, and I almost skipped over the most important part where this meteorite falls from space, the Blob, and this hobo in the woods goes to like check it out. He pokes it with a stick and whatnot, and the Blob just runs all the way up his arm and starts eating off his arm. So he takes off running and screaming, and the kid Brian is in the woods and sees him like running away all freaked out, and he's asking him, are you all right, old man? He ends up chasing after him, kind of chases him out into the road, and that's when Paul and Meg are coming by on the date, and they hit the old guy, and then they're accusing Brian, what was that, chasing him out, causing us to hit him, and Brian's trying to tell him it's something on the arm. They demand that he comes with them to the hospital because he's going to have to explain his side of the story to the police. So now, most of our characters, the three teenagers, are all together here. They make it to the hospital. The old guy is really messed up, and Brian ends up leaving. He shows like a little part of humanity where he kind of talks to the old man. Listen, old man, they're going to take care of you. Be careful. And it shows like Meg kind of noticing him. So there's like a little progression in the storyline between them two right there, a little glimpse of it. So anyways, the doctors are all busy. The old man's back in the hospital in the way back of it. And Paul is kind of like filling out this paperwork, and he kind of hears some stuff. So he walks back there and he sees the old man. His eyes are rolling in the back of his head. His throat is like bubbling up. It's really gnarly shit here. So he runs back into the doctor's office. There's a man dying in here. Gets the doctor to come in there. They pull back the blankets. Whole bottom half of his body is just melting away, and it is absolutely disgusting. They start freaking out. They start yelling. Paul runs into the like one of the doctor's offices and grabs the phone to call the police. and he starts explaining to them what's happening. Man has been murdered, and there's the blob crawling up the ceiling now, and it's right above him. It starts dropping a couple like drops of whatever it is into the table below, and it's burning the table, but Paul doesn't notice until it's too late. He looks up, this blob drops on him off screen, you hear him screaming. Meg runs into the room, and this is one of the scenes that always stood out to me as a kid. It is crazy. The whole blob is just over his face, stretching it back. I believe it used to be what was on the cover of the old VHS, but this blob is just tearing him up, and the scream he is letting out will haunt your dreams. Meg goes to grab his arm to try to pull him out of this blob. His whole arm rips off, and his face is getting peeled back. Blood's coming out of his eyes. His skull is caving in. It is crazy, and I must mention the effects by Tony Gardner in this movie. I believe he was responsible for the effects on Aliens. And like a cool fact, I believe he got his start on my favorite horror movie, Return of the Living Dead, doing the effects on the split dogs and stuff like that, if you've seen that film. But only 23 years old when he did these effects, and these effects are what really makes this movie stand out overall. But anyways, to get back at it, when Meg pulls his arm off, she actually like knocks her head against the wall. So she gets taken home after talking to the police, and she's totally shook up. So then she realizes, the police aren't going to help her. The police certainly aren't going to help this Brian kid, who's like the outlaw in town. So she goes to find this Brian kid to tell him what she saw, because she remembers he was talking about the blob on the old man's arm. She finds Brian, who goes into this diner where that woman originally was working, and he doesn't want to talk to her at all. The diner's already closed, the doors are locked. She makes her way in, locks the door behind her, or whatever. She kind of forces him to talk to her. He kind of is an asshole to her, and she gets upset, and then he realizes he's being a jerk, and they start kind of talking it out a little bit. And then this time, in the back, the waitress, the lady who owns the diner or whatever, was trying to get a clog out of the sink. So like the kitchen staff guy goes to do it instead, and there's something stuck in the sink, and you know what it is. Another wild effect, his whole body gets pulled like into this sink. Like waist down is like all that's hanging out from the top, and it's nasty. Then the waitress sees it, she starts screaming. Brian and Meg run back there. That's when they both believe what's going on, because they see this guy getting killed like that. They take off running. They make it into this freezer where it foreshadows that cold weather or whatnot might hurt the blob. So the blob is obviously from Michigan, but anyways, they're hiding in this freezer, and the waitress runs outside while the blob's chasing after her. She gets in this phone booth. A lot of you that watch this might not know what that is, but in the phone booth, the blob covers the whole thing, and that's when it shows the sheriff who was going to take her out on the date. He's just gliding through this blob, and his face is all ripped apart. He's been killed too. It takes in this phone booth, eats her up too, which that's a good part of this movie, I feel, as well, because they had me invested in the sheriff and the waitress and Paul. I thought these guys were all going to make it to the end, and just like that, they kind of tricked me and took them out, because it almost felt like a first time watching again. It's been so long, but anyways, Brian and Meg make their escape. They go back to the woods where the meteor was. And in the meantime, we cut to a movie theater, which is kind of playing the slasher. I like when they play like a movie in the movie and you think it's a part of the one you're watching, then it cuts to like people watching it in the theater. And that's kind of what it does between Meg's little brother and his friend. Which the cool thing about her little brother, speaking of Return of the Living Dead, he actually played Jesse from Return of the Living Dead Part 2, which is actually one of my favorites as well. And I think this is actually that kid's last movie role that I've seen. But anyways, they're watching the movie. Some guy upstairs that's running the film like they used to do back in the day. He's up there sweating. He's checking the air vent. He's calling the guy downstairs. What's up? Why is it so hot up here? The guy says that owns the movie theater, the air's been running. So he goes to check it himself, this guy who's working upstairs. And another great kill. The blob gets him. The owner comes upstairs to check on him. And he looks up and he sees the guy that was running it is he's glued to the ceiling by the blob, and his face is just mutilated. You have to see this movie to believe it for these effects. And then the blob takes out that guy too. The blob ends up tearing through the screen and into the theater, and it starts chasing everyone down the theater, which is a good throwback to the original from, I believe, 1956. So it's a pure chaos there. And then to cut back to Brian and Meg, they made it back to where the meteor was, and there's all these scientists and everything, these big suits, just like like these guys on the cover here, they're all back there checking this out. They tell the kids that it's kind of just like I don't remember exactly what they said it was, some like, just a mistake with chemicals from space and something like that or whatever. So they start to quarantine the whole town, and they take these two kids and like pretty much demand they get in the van, and they're taking them back. And then Brian's like, fuck this, nobody's ever looked out for me in my life, I look out for myself. And he kind of like, she makes him feel bad, like he's bailing selfishly, because he kind of undoes the back doors of the van, rolls out, goes and finds his motorcycle and takes off, while the girl wants to go back and make sure her family's okay. So while Brian's got his bike in the woods, he's kind of walking out quietly. He overhears the scientists talking about how it's not what they said it was. It was like some kind of chemical warfare thing that they were developing during the Cold War that went wrong, so they sent it out into space to get rid of it because it was so dangerous, but it came back. So now they're going to quarantine the whole town, try to lock the Blob into like the sewers, and just destroy the whole town. And the scientist pretty much says the people in the town are expendable, to save everyone else. So he's kind of a little evil here, and Brian hears this and he says, he realizes, no way, I got to save the day. The scientists see him. He starts driving away on his bike. They're shooting at him. They're driving helicopters over him, all these Jeeps behind him. And then he hits this classic 80s, which I love this part. He hits this bridge that's broken down the middle and just clears it. This badass jump, kind of gives him the finger or whatever. Leaves him in his dust. Classic 80s stuff. I loved it. He drives back to town to try to save everyone. Meanwhile, Meg made it to the theater, and she gets her brother and his friend, and they're running. They jump into the sewer while the Blob's entail. The Blob starts coming after him in the sewer, and they start climbing up these pipes to try to get away. But the kid Jesse falls, the little brother's friend. He falls and back into the water, so Meg jumps in to go save him. And before she can get to him, his body comes back up like a skeleton all covered in the Blob, killed. Like, they fucking killed a kid in this remake. They weren't fucking around in this. And it was wild. They didn't show it on screen, just showed his body. But anyways, Meg goes to get out of there. She can't fit through the pipe, so she sends her brother away without her to go to this big, like, town hall building that they're being quarantined in. And in the meantime, Brian finds her in the sewer. He pulls her out, throws her on the back of his bike. The Blob is in this, like, round pipe down there blocking their way out. And in another classic 80s moment, he literally does the loop. He drives his motorcycle a 360 through the loop to get away. What a badass. So then they make it back up to the town. This is with help from a very hurt soldier played by Bill Moseley, who did a little appearance in there, by the way. Just shout out Bill Moseley, because I know a lot of people out there love Bill Moseley. I do too as well. But anyways, Brian and Meg make it back to town, and Brian grabs like a gun. He's like, he holds up everyone. The cops start pulling out guns. The scientists pull out guns. He's like, listen, he tells the truth. This is all bullshit. The scientists did this, and they're going to kill us all. And then the main scientist kind of loses it. Oh, whatever. Don't listen to him. Shoot him. Shoot him. And while he's going off, he finally gets his. The Blob busts out of the sewer, yanks him in, and kills him. And that's when one, like, the scientists that didn't agree with the main scientist, like, way he wanted to kill the town, he's like, let's take care of this, throws a bomb into the sewer, starts shooting guns at him, and they're like, all right, cool, everything's straight, we killed the Blob. But you knew it wouldn't be that easy. The Blob just explodes out of the sewer, breaks up all the ground, just starts killing everybody, chasing everybody down. And I will say one critique, this is the one time the Blob doesn't really hold up, when they show it in, like, a big way, like the big mass of the Blob, and it's chasing people through the city. It looks very green screen and whatnot, but you gotta forgive it. If I'm criticizing stuff like that, like the whole plot of the movie means nothing, because the whole plot's pretty ridiculous. I'd say the Blob is in large form looks kind of hokey, but all the kills, like I say again, are well worth it. Some of the best gore I've ever seen in my entire life. So anyways, the Blob is chasing everyone down. They're all barricading into this town hall, and in this crazy sequence, this kid Brian, there's another whole plot I found. He goes back to this mechanic shop where he got tools earlier to help fix his bike from, like, his mechanic friend. And the guy's just so happening to fix, like, a snow-making machine, like a big truck that blows snow. What are the odds, like, a little town like this just has, like, a truck like that? And that's when I had to tell myself when watching it, but like, yeah, but think of the whole plot of the movie and you're questioning this. But so anyways, just gotta have fun with it. But he's driving this truck back. He ends up flipping it. He's about to get killed by this Blob that's coming in. Meg kind of saves him. She comes out, throws one of the bombs at the snow truck that's flipped. It explodes, snow flies everywhere, lands on top of this blob, and kind of like freezes it and kills it. And everybody comes out, and everything looks okay. And when one part where I do like logic, it is actually the mechanic that comes out from earlier that I didn't mention comes out, and he says something along the lines of like, we better take all these parts down to like the big town like meat factory and throw it in the freezer before it defrosts. I'm like, that's a good point. I probably wouldn't have thought about that if I was in the situation. But anyways, yeah, everything's right in the world. Happy little ending. And then we cut to this really weird scene that I don't quite understand. It was like the priest from earlier who kind of got attacked by the blob. He's in like this little tent in some disclosed area, and he's having his own like church session, but it's all about like the blob coming back, like, you know, like Jesus coming back, but he's talking like the blob is the prophecy, and he's all scarred up and looks all crazy. And then he like walks into the back, and he's got this little jar with like frozen pieces of like, or not frozen, but little pieces of the blob that's still alive in this glass. Like, so it kind of leaves like a why can't I say it's a cliffhanger? Yeah, like it would have been pretty good to throw like a sequel in this, like especially how it has elements of sci-fi. You know, it's kind of is a science fiction movie in a way. It could have been pretty cool to go from there, but I mean, I'm not really sure what they meant through that. And again, I'm like, if the blob can break through doors and walls and concrete, why can't it just bust through this glass? But I'm reading into it too much. Bottom line is, this movie was incredible. I knew it would take me this long to go over it, because when I talk about movies I love, I rant on and ramble on. But yeah, this holds up great. Another movie I would say that's better than the original, which I would also say like The Thing, The Blob, and I mean, what else has better remakes? I mean, those are probably the two. I like the Night of the Living Dead remake too. But anyways, yeah, really good atmosphere, little small town feel. All the characters are very likable for the most part. You get very invested in all of them. Storyline didn't drag at all. You know, nice pieces of humor. This is honestly as close to a perfect horror movie as I could get to. This has got it all. You know, yeah, man, great kills, good story, good soundtrack, good visuals. The whole thing is really good. You know, like I said, the only things I didn't like was how the blob looked as a big blob, you know, or some of the logic in killing this blob was a little hokey to me. I would have liked maybe a better finish, but overall, I highly recommend watching this movie. Like I said, just came out maybe 2 going on 3 weeks ago. Yeah, I think it'll be 3 weeks tomorrow. So new release on Blu-ray, something every horror fan should have. So I'm very happy. Just put it on my shelf. Yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this. I haven't done a little review in a while. I've been kind of busy with a lot of things, but I'm going to try to hop back on it here. If there's any movies you guys suggest I should check out or you want to hear me review, please let me know in the comments. Thanks again for all your support. Like, comment, subscribe. Feel free to share the videos. Blood, guts, and gore. I will check you guys next time.